Hey guys, sorry I couldn't make it in tonight. Thanks for your flexibility though with watching this video. Okay, so as you can see here, I interviewed Adam Jacobowitz from Northrop High School. He's the senior counselor at Northrop. And I also interviewed Gary Rogers from Leo High School. He is the freshman and sophomore counselor there. So my first question obviously was a question about years of experience. Mr. Jacobowitz has 5 years of experience in the field. Before studying school counseling, he was actually a business major and worked in the business field for a couple of years, but then moved into school counseling shortly thereafter. So he's been in the field for 5 years now. Mr. Rogers has been in the field for 30 years actually, and he's been in East Allen all of that time. So when I asked a question about the most rewarding aspect of the job, Mr. Jacobowitz said that the most rewarding aspect for him is to help kids to finally understand the importance of doing well in school. And Mr. Rogers actually gave a similar answer to that. He says the most rewarding aspect is seeing a student down the road and knowing that you made a difference in their life. So really it was a pretty similar answer from both. They both talked about how much they love actually making a difference in a student's life and how that's the favorite part of their job. Then for the biggest challenge they face on a daily basis, obviously as Mr. Jacobowitz being the senior counselor at Northrop, senior attendance, students working hard in class, too much testing, having enough time to complete all the work, things of that nature. So it's really related to his position as a senior counselor at Northrop. And the biggest challenge that Mr. Rogers faces is always having work to do. So it's kind of more of a personal challenge that he faces, always having work to do, and really there never comes a time when it's completely done. Another thing that he finds challenging is leaving his emotions at work when he's working with a difficult, or when he's working with a student who comes from a difficult situation. And then asking them whether or not they deal with personal social issues, they both said yes, and they both said the main medium through which they work with students is on a one-to-one basis in their office. However, Mr. Rogers also did say that he takes advantage of his time when he swings by the cafeteria and takes the opportunity to catch up with kids and talk with them there as well. In terms of group counseling, I also, for my personal question, asked what the biggest social issue is that they face. And they both talked about how social media plays a really big role in their social issues they face. So it causes embarrassment of peers, things like that. Students make fun of one another. Basically, students will take pictures of themselves, not realizing that this picture is permanent, and once it's out on the web, everybody has access to it. So it's a big problem that they both face as school counselors. And a big social issue at Leo that Mr. Rogers mentioned is suicide. That's something he works with students a lot on. So I thought it was interesting that both had social media as a big factor, and then in addition to that, Leo, or Mr. Rogers, said that suicide is a huge issue at Leo. And I asked him about group counseling as well. Mr. Jacobowitz reported that they do group counseling at Northrop, and there's none of really the paid counselors who work with the group counseling. There's an intern from IPFW who is currently there, who's working with group counseling. They do things such as conflict mediation, behavior modification, and things like that. Those are common focuses of the group counseling. And Mr. Rogers said that group counseling isn't performed at Leo, and that simply becomes because it takes it's really hard to coordinate schedules between multiple students. It's hard enough to pull out a student from a certain class where the teacher doesn't get upset, let us alone schedule even 5+ students or so for a group. So really just because of managing the time that they meet, that it really is a big barrier for them for group counseling. And again, the most common barriers for preventing academic success that really depended on the age level that they worked with. With Mr. Jacobowitz at Northrop, obviously working with seniors, attendance is a big issue. Not turning in homework, they just kind of start to slough off and get lazy in their senior year. They don't take advantage of the opportunity to make up exams. And then Mr. Rogers, with the 9th and 10th grade students, they're just coming into high school and they may not be as motivated as they should be to do well. So again, he reported that the big challenge for him is that the students are lazy and they really don't work really hard sometimes. And in terms of the role of data, they both said it plays a really huge role for them. Mr. Jacobowitz spends time reviewing things such as credits, attendance, and how programs like the positive behavior intervention system is working, referral numbers, things like that. Mr. Rogers said, data is huge. Everything is data driven. There's so much more paperwork now that the data has become so huge, and that they've been required to track so much of it. The biggest change that they saw in the school counselor's role since starting their position, Mr. Jacobowitz, obviously only being there 5 years, he hasn't seen as many changes as Mr. Rogers, but the biggest change he saw was the change when they brought in the positive behavior reward systems. Basically, it's a system that rewards students for good behavior. So that's a huge change he's seen, and Fort Wayne Community Schools actually implemented that the 2012 to 2013 academic year. So it's been around for about a year and a half now. So that's a big change he's seen. He's also seen a really big increase in testing. Even just within the last 5 years, he feels that the amount of testing has increased substantially. From Mr. Rogers' perspective at Leo, the biggest change he's seen is bullying, and this obviously isn't just bullying in general. Obviously bullying is nothing new, but he just talked about how it's much more publicized now. It's really much more common in the media to talk about bullying. In the field of education, bullying is really huge right now, obviously. So just the fact that bullying is so publicized and kids are willing to discuss it. Kids know the difference between physical bullying, emotional bullying, things like that, and they're willing to talk about it with a school counselor. In terms of what they believe new school counselors should know going into the profession, Mr. Jacobowitz thought that it'd be really important for new school counselors to remind themselves that they are advocates for the students who they work for. So even the students that really give you a hard time and students who may not be so nice, you have to try and understand why that student might be acting like that, and then act on behalf of them. So he said that's really important. It can be really challenging sometimes to do that, but he said that's really important to remember. And then Mr. Rogers said the biggest thing he would want a new school counselor to know is the importance of being flexible. And I mean, your day is basically so contingent upon what students are dealing with. So it's important to be flexible with that. And he also thinks it's important to know how much time is actually spent in the profession. So it's not just a, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 sort of position. You always take a lot of schoolwork home with you. In fact, he does a lot of his scheduling over the summers. So he doesn't necessarily have a time when he just completely forgets about school and lets it go. There's a lot of work involved with it. Also, obviously, again, kind of going along with that, challenges of completing a task. And also, he thought it'd be really important to stay organized. As school counselors start out, obviously with all the data we're required to keep track of nowadays, and just all the work that continually gets added to our load, he says it's really important to stay organized, and on top of just all your information so that you can work more efficiently. In terms of the typical duties performed on a daily basis, this was my extra question number 2. I just wanted to find out what really the difference was between the administrative position at Northrop and the guidance position at Leo. I know they're classified differently there, but they really had some common duties. They both did scheduling, they both did ECA prep, meeting with students. The biggest difference between the two in terms of daily duties was the supervisory duties. So Mr. Jacobowitz would, for example, have to supervise hallways, lunchrooms, things like that, to ensure that basically to supervise the students. And Mr. Rogers did a lot of the same things, except he didn't really have to do any of the supervisory duties. And he did say that there really isn't a typical day, so it's kind of hard to say what a typical day looks like. It's really just determined by what the students want each day and what their needs are for the day. One thing that I thought was really important to take away from my interview overall is just the amount of time that's spent doing things that don't necessarily include interacting with students. So like supervisory duties, for example, with Mr. Jacobowitz. And with Mr. Rogers, when he goes down to the lunchroom to grab his lunch, they have an opportunity to interact with students. And though it's not necessarily part of their job at that time, they take advantage of the time that they have to interact with students and maybe answer a quick question here or there to avoid more work in the future. So I thought that was pretty important, and just looking to invest that time with students to help ease the pressure of the schedule later on. So that was all I had for you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you guys in class next week.